In a world brimming with xenomorphs, the Alien franchise took the audience by surprise when they released Alien Covenant and introduced us to a whole new species, the Neomorphs. While they bore some resemblance to the OG aliens, Neomorphs were shorter and much more aggressive than an average xenomorph, and they were supposedly the result of a mysterious pathogen. While they shared reproductive processes similar to xenomorphs, these creatures carved a new identity for themselves and were infamous for emerging from host bodies through unusual body parts. This is just one of their many quirks, and today we will be diving into their key anatomical details and tell you everything about the Neomorphs, aka the plagiarism Celarius. Now, before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Who is Neomorph? Labeled as Heomorphs by the Union of Progressive Peoples, Neomorphs were one of the many endoparasitoid extraterrestrial species that were littered across the aliens universe. They made their first appearance on board a colony ship, USCSS Covenant, when the Weyland-Yutani Corporation crew embarked on a mission to an unknown planet. Eventually, they started popping up on LV-991 and the mining planet Vashanman, and the crew members noticed that they were quite similar to xenomorphs. What are their unique physiological adaptations of Neomorph? Neomorphs came into being after exposure to the mutagenic chemical A03959X.91-15, which was also commonly known as the black liquid or Prometheus fire. After getting in contact with the black goo, the initial stage in their life cycle was in the form of fungal-like growth that took the form of egg sacs. If these sacs were damaged by a potential host body, they would burst open and release a bunch of spore-like motes with a hive mind. In this way, they formed an intelligence and hunted for the nearest victim they could latch onto to assume their final form. As soon as they came across a viable host, they would infect their body through their nostrils or auditory canals. Since they were as tiny as a grain of sand, they had no trouble infecting their victims, and one would have to study them under a microscope even to perceive them. After finally making their way into a host body, they injected their bloodstream with a black liquid which would rewrite the host's DNA. Soon enough, the host would start developing a tumor without a vein, which would burst open and take the form of a blood burster. This entire process was crucial to the Neomorph life cycle, and the blood burster typically violently bursts through the host body. They had sharp dorsal spines that could rip through the host's flesh and bones, and these blood bursters would soon grow into juvenile neophytes. These baby Neomorphs were voracious carnivores, and they would aggressively feast on just about anybody in their path. In a matter of few hours, they assumed their final form and grew about 2.1 meters tall after having reached maturity. However, their lives were quite short, and they typically died within a day. Any fungus that came into contact with their corpses would soon assume the form of egg sacs, and this cycle of life ensured that this species did not go extinct. Some of the key features of their physiology are as follows. Reproductive mechanism. Unlike the xenomorphs, Neomorphs developed from spores, which allowed them to gestate within a host body and emerge from unusual body parts, such as ears or throat, while xenomorphs typically burst through the host's chest. Neomorphs were much more flexible, and they could emerge through any bodily orifices. Their adaptability allowed them to exploit a wide range of hosts and environments, as opposed to xenomorphs who had to stick primarily human hosts. How does the Neomorph's final form look? In their final stage of development, a fully grown Neomorph had pale, translucent skin and a bulbous head that defined their physique. Their heads tapered off in a sharp, pointy manner that allowed them to strike down their victims. And they also had a pharyngeal jaw that made it easy for them to consume their prey. Neomorphs underwent a morphological adaptation that made them natural hunters, and they were one of the fiercest predators in this universe. Their appearance also depended on the host organisms, but they usually had a humanoid form with 2 arms and legs. They had long, spiky tails, and they initially walked on all fours before adopting a bipedal stance. While they stood tall at the height of 7 to 8 feet, they mostly crouched their backs while moving around and appeared a couple of feet shorter. Lack of hive behavior. While xenomorphs operated within a hive and structured caste system centered around their queens, Neomorphs only formed a hive intelligence before they latched onto a host body. They did not engage in the same form of dependent behavior as xenomorphs, which granted them enough flexibility to move around in different environments and target a variety of hosts. physical strength and agility. Neomorphs were famously known for their strong, spiky tails that could leave their victims with lethal slash marks. In fact, these tails were so strong that they could remove an entire human jaw with a single strike of their tails. They were also highly agile creatures, and their tails served as an additional advantage that helped them rise to the position of apex predators in a wide range of terrains. How does neomorph behavior differ from that of typical xenomorphs? Are they more feral? As compared to their xenomorph counterparts, neomorphs were far more aggressive and animalistic when it came to attacking their prey. They were at their most feral when they were newly born, that they soon grew into mature xenomorphs who used strategies when they were sneaking up on their prey. While they were not as intelligent as xenomorphs, they did have a couple of stealth tactics up their sleeve, and we can see this when one of the neomorphs sneaked up on Rosie and gave her a moment before mauling her to death. Neomorphs also seem to have a huge appetite, and they often attack their prey in need of their flesh to survive. This behavior was only restricted to their species, as xenomorphs rarely even consumed their victims. While xenomorphs were characterized by their extendable inner jaws, neomorphs had evolved in a way that their guns could extend out so that they could feed on their prey. Typically, their jawline was entirely invisible, and it was quite a terrorizing sight to see their jaws extend right before they lunged at their victims. After studying these creatures, David concluded that the black liquid mutagen that played a role in their creation was the reason why they instinctively felt the need to hunt down any animal life in their ecosystem. They could also differentiate between human meat and synthetics, and one such neomorph had once backed off after realizing that David was a synthetic android. At the same time, another neomorph lunged at Walter's arm and bit it off, and they had an animalistic drive that differentiated them from the xenomorphs. How are they different from a typical adult xenomorph? For starters, neomorphs mostly function independently as opposed to xenomorphs, who are notable for operating within a hive mind. They have a structured system centered around a xenomorph queen, and they rely on coordinated swarm tactics to target their victims. In comparison, neomorphs have adapted to all sorts of ecosystems and environments, and they can move around on their own to attack a broader range of hosts without relying on their team. They also lunge at their opponents in a frenzy, while an adult xenomorph might take its time and plan a calculated ambush attack. Xenomorphs are also focused on their longevity and survival, and they refrain from feeding on their victims right away. Instead, they save their bodies for future implantation. While neomorphs might immediately make a meal out of their prey, neomorphs also differ from xenomorphs in terms of their appearances, as they have both pale skin compared to the xenomorph's dark exoskeleton, and to top it all off, their bodies seem to lack the acidic blood that makes the xenomorph so lethal, making it easier to kill them without facing any dire consequences. Was the neomorph a failed experiment, a genetic anomaly? Now that we've explored the neomorph's primary characteristics, it is certain that they do share many of their traits with the iconic xenomorphs. Ranging from their translucent skin and bulbous head to their aggressive nature, they seem to be hailing from the same facility. This also raises some questions about their origins, as they seem to have an underdeveloped form of xenomorphs after being exposed to the black liquid. While there are no concrete theories about this one, some fans wonder if the neomorphs were one of David's failed experiments with human DNA and the black liquid. While this is a mere speculation, neomorphs are a genetic anomaly of sorts, and this theory does seem a bit plausible. Who would win in a fight, xenomorphs or neomorphs? At the end of the day, xenomorphs and neomorphs share a few similar characteristics, ranging from sharp claws to strong limbs and powerful bites. Any face-off between the two species would turn into a bloodbath, and both of them would be capable of besting the other. Even in such a scenario, neomorphs are slightly more intelligent than xenomorphs, and they might just have the mental bandwidth to come up with a clever strategy to take the latter down. They are also far more animalistic in nature, but one must not forget that xenomorphs are lethal monsters who have been around for way longer. While neomorphs might be more feral, they are sometimes considered a genetic experiment gone wrong. While xenomorphs operate within a structured hive intelligence, they are also taller and bigger than average neomorph. And while these creatures have not faced each other yet, the consensus is in the xenomorph's favor. Is xenomorph stronger than other xenomorph types? Neomorphs are often likened to a few other xenomorph types, such as the newborn and the offspring. Due to their physical characteristics, however, these creatures are not at all the same, and the newborn especially has a far more humanoid appearance than the neomorph. While neomorphs burst from within their host bodies, the newborn was a result of a live birth and it had a humanoid interaction. With very few xenomorph characteristics, the newborn did not have a tail, dorsal tubes, or an inner jaw, and it also had fleshy skin as compared to the neomorph's translucent appearance. It was also considered to be an extremely intelligent entity with the ability to experience emotions, while neomorphs lacked emotional intelligence and displayed animalistic instincts that prevented them from making calculated decisions. In this regard, neomorphs could probably defeat the newborn due to their feral nature. But there is always a fighting chance that the latter could have used its intelligence to dodge their attacks. Besides the newborn, the offspring was another xenomorph-human hybrid who caught the audience's eyes with its strange origins. This creature came into being when a scavenger named Kay Harrison injected herself with Z01 during her pregnancy while traveling on board the Corbilon 4. This triggered a mutation in her unborn fetus, which had the human characteristics upon birth. Soon enough, this infant started taking the form of a xenomorph with pale skin, a long tail, and outlets for dorsal tubes, and his body constantly changed as he grew exponentially in no time. While he was almost like a baby xenomorph, this creature had the strength to bash down metal doors or slash his claws at his opponents. Unfortunately, he was soon killed by a salvager named Rain Carradine, and we might never find out if he could have grown strong enough to defeat neomorphs at some point in his life. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we've come to the end of our deep dive into this terrifying species that might have just surpassed xenomorphs in terms of their lethality. While they have a short lifespan, neomorphs have managed to stir up quite a ruckus and destroy many different forms of host bodies. They certainly stand out among other extraterrestrial species in terms of physiology, and we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.